Hello. We're about ready to get started here. I'm Ron Smith. I'm one of your Josephine County Commissioners. I have my friend Bob Hart here. We've been fighting this issue for 2.5 years. Louder? Is that better? Okay. So we've been fighting this issue for 2.5 years. We've been going everywhere holding these meetings because I think you have a right to know. You have a right to know that this is not about wildfires. I pegged this thing in the very beginning as an attack on private property rights and your right to live in rural Oregon. But I want you to pay attention to this PowerPoint presentation because he's going to dissect this law piece by piece. He's done a great job. Bob has been a county planner for 20 years. Now he's a private land use consultant. He's just tore this thing apart. But I want you to realize you've got to file your appeal by March 10th. And Bob's going to go through the kind of things you should say on that appeal. But I want to let you know that we can take care of this problem locally. We don't need a state telling us we have a problem. We all know we should clean up our properties and be ready for fire. Okay? I got my wife back in there telling me I'm supposed to talk louder, so I'm going to talk louder. We can take care of this problem locally. We don't need the state mandating this stuff. We don't need them telling us what kind of house we can build, where we can build our houses, whether we have any property rights or not. Property rights, if you don't have property rights, you have no rights whatsoever. A great man fought the federal government over property rights long before the Bundys in Nevada. He made a great statement. He said, if you don't have the right to own property and control property, you are property. Well, I don't want to be property of the state. Do you? How many people have their insurance rates go up? Undue, 762. 762 did that to you. How many people had their electric bills go up? 762 did that to you. We are having an effect by holding these meetings. We are letting the state know we're not happy with this, and we're going to fight back. So I want you to pay attention tonight. We have some very qualified people in the room tonight that know much about fires, and maybe we'll get them to answer some questions later on. So we're going to do this introduction. We're going to have a PowerPoint presentation, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers. So have your questions ready, and when we get to that point, I really don't want any long dissertations or long great statements. Just ask a question that's probably on everybody's mind, and we'll try to answer all those questions. So I'm going to introduce a friend of mine who's worked with me closely on this issue. Mr. Bob Hart, I highly respect his ability to dissect the law because he has done a great job. He's got a wonderful PowerPoint presentation for you. You see that screen up there? Undo762.org. Write that down. That's a web page. Undo762.org. All you got to do is punch in your browser, Undo762. If you punch in Undo762, that web page will come up, and pretty much everything you need is on that web page. And I want you to pay close attention to Bob's presentation because he has dissected this law. Bob, come up. Show these people what this law is really about.
Good evening. My name is Bob Hart. I tell people I'm a recovering land use planner. I started out working for the county back in the 70s. Got to the point that government was telling people what to do. And I said, it's time to try and help the folks, so I left the county and started my own consulting business to try and help people get through the process. And that's where we got louder or we've got feedback. We'll see what we can do. Everybody, okay. try that. Tonight we're going to talk about 3 bills that have already been passed. These are laws today. And that's what we have to worry about, are the laws on the books today. We start out with SB762. It was adopted in 2021. We have SB80 that was adopted in 2023, and SB82 that was also adopted in 2023. The first one, 762, the one that caused all the problem, it was a requirement to draw a map of Oregon to try and identify where the highest fire danger would be statewide, so they could put resources to try and stop the fire situation. There's nothing in this bill that's going to stop any fire anywhere. So it's not something that is much more than just a tool to identify something. It doesn't fix anything. So I said this was adopted in 2021. They created 5 risk zones, and they created what they call the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface, and that's where the concentrations of houses are. And their definition of concentration is a house per every 40 acres. So if you have anything more than 1 house per 40 acres, then you're in this Wildland Urban Interface, the WUI. These maps were required to be drawn by the Oregon State University and worked with the Oregon Department of Forestry. One of the big things that came out is a mandate, and everybody talks about we don't like mandates without funding. That just doesn't work. If they tell you got to do something, somebody's got to pay for it, and they expect you to do it. And the first thing they required was what they call defensible space, which is the areas around your house to try and modify vegetation to try and keep fire from getting too close. So they put out these nice little pamphlets, and it says you're supposed to take any trees and limb them up off the ground at least 6 feet or a third of the tree. The other thing is you're supposed to have 10 feet between trees where the branches can't even touch. That's the way their system is designed. I've talked to the state fire marshal about that and said it's not really practical to do that. And they said, well, we'll consider it, but right now the way the rules are, you have to keep trees at least 10 feet apart, and they want vegetation at least 10 feet away from the house. Now, how far out are you supposed to do this? They have another nice little drawing. It says you have to clear that for at least 50 feet around your house. And they go, well, do we have to cut down all trees? They go, no, that's not what we're asking for. But you have to limit up. They want you to stop what they call ladder fuels, where fire starts on the ground, gets to brush, and then gets to the lower branches, and then up into the crowns, and then it's very difficult to stop. So ideas are good, but then they added to it what they call the building codes per the international wildfire requirements. This isn't something that was thought up in Oregon. It was an international code. And what it says is roofing. If you're going to replace a roof, you got a portion of the house that needs roofing, they want you to do the whole roof all at once in Class A or Class B roofing materials. Gutters have to be non-flammable, and they're supposed to cover the gutters to where you can't get a buildup of pine needles or brush or leaves. Exterior siding, they want it to be fire resistant, like hardy board. I don't know about anybody else, but I've got an old house built in the 1940s. It's got shingles on the side. It's painted. We keep vegetation away, but that exterior siding, if I do anything to my house, I'm going to have to replace all of the siding for the entire house. They have new designs for soffits to try and keep embers from going into the attic, with grates as fine as 1/8 of an inch, which are great for stopping the embers from getting into the attic, but it cuts down your ventilation into the house. With stopping the ventilation going through the house, you start getting black mold, things like that into the, so it's a problem. Decks, you're supposed to have siding all the way down to where things can't get under the deck. And this would apply to any new building or any remodel or addition. We've talked to builders and they said just basic things. If you're doing a remodel onto a house, this will add $5,000 to $7,000 of cost over what it was before they added these requirements. So how do people find out about this? In the law, it says everybody that's in the high or extreme risk area and in the wildland urban interface, the WUI, they're supposed to get a letter that explained this whole thing. It's just a couple of pages. It wasn't a very detailed letter, but it seemed very threatening to most people. The state decided they were going to do some public information meetings throughout the state. The first one was to be held in Grass Pass. They canceled it. They said that they received death threats from people. I don't know about death threats, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that kind of introduce them to a few flying fists. Anyway, they canceled that, and they canceled the one in Medford as well, and they did it on a Zoom meeting. There was over 2,000 people on that first Zoom meeting. Everybody was opposed to this. This was just crazy. They were explaining insurances were canceled. Insurance rates were going crazy. First it started with 2,000 and it just kept building and building, and finally the state said, okay, you got our attention, we're going to withdraw the map, we'll fix it. A lot of people at that time thought, we're all done. We've put it to bed, we don't have to deal with this anymore. Until 2023, when SB 80 came out. This was supposed to revise the map. We're going to fix all the problems of the first map. What they did was change the name of the map from a risk map to a hazard map. They reduced the zones to 3. They combined the high and the extreme, and they combined the 2 lowest, a no impact or low impact. So we basically have 3 zones that didn't change much of anything at all. The one thing they did add at that point in time was the appeal process was changed to a contested case. That came from the Department of Justice. It is a quasi-trial, and that's when it got a lot of people's attention, because when you read the rules about contested case, it says if your property is in a trust, you're going to have to be represented by an attorney, which drives the cost even crazier when you have to hire an attorney to do that as well. The state has backed off somewhat. They have said now you can submit your appeals without having an attorney. But when they have the hearings, which will be later this spring or summer or fall, depending on how many appeals they get, you will have to have an attorney represent you during that hearing process. So what we need to do is stop this in its tracks. That's what we need to do. So the things that they did was they amended the Oregon administrative rules to address defensible space and home hardening, and they changed a few words, but nothing substantial. They did adopt SB 82 in response to the issue of insurance. What they did was they told the insurance companies, You have to raise your right hand and swear that you do not use the Oregon map to figure out your insurance issues. But I'm not here to defend them in any fashion whatsoever. I'm just telling you, this is how it was supposed to work, was the insurance companies were supposed to close their eyes and never look at the map. If they are going to cancel you or raise your rate substantially, they're supposed to notify you beforehand and give you the opportunity to do some improvements to meet their standards and keep your insurance. I've heard people that called their insurance company because the rates were going way up. They came out and looked at the property and they said, for us to feel comfortable with it, it's about $10,000 worth of improvements. And how many people have $10,000 laying around that they just want to pay to trim some trees or do some things like that? I know I had a couple of trees removed, did some things, and it cost me $6,000. You know, if it's my choice, it's my choice, and I can budget for what I want to do. But to have the state tell me I've got to do this when it is not going to stop the fire, that's not appropriate in my estimation. So if you do get a letter from your insurance company or they raise your rates, and you can complain to the state, they do have an office that is supposed to be on your behalf to try and talk to the insurance companies and fix it. If you got a packet of information from the state, there should be a paper in there that lists the insurance company's representative at the state level that can work on your behalf. So now that they're doing a new map, they said, well, we'll explain to the people, because they obviously didn't understand the first time what we were trying to do to help them. So they had regional 6, what they called open houses. I went to the one in Medford. They spent a grand total of 15 minutes saying that we've done this and it's good science and just trust us. We're doing this to help you. And then they said, you go around and talk to the individual departments if you have any questions. But the maps they had at those regional open houses didn't even show tax lots. They were still in a draft form. I guess the only real improvement that we got out of it at this point was agricultural irrigation was considered a mitigation factor. So if you have a large farm and irrigation, they were going to put that in as a factor. And there were 4,000 lots statewide that came from high down to moderate. So that's the adjustment that happened. It was 4,000 lots statewide, not much of a change at all. So the current status was the final map was approved and issued and put on their website on January 7th of this year, 2025. By the rules that they adopted, you have 60 days to file an appeal. The appeals are to be done as a contested case, and they have their own set of rules. The letter was sent out to people in high hazard areas and within the WUI. But if you're in a high area outside the WUI, you can appeal as well. The Wildfire Explorer, which is the state website that shows these maps, there's a website listed there, so you can go there to look up your property. And the reason you need to go do that is because the letters that they sent to you were very, very limited in any of the information. It was mainly saying, gee, we've adopted this program, you're in it, and here's the agencies that are involved. Here's how appeals work, good luck. And you go, but what does all of this really do? So that's where you go to the website. The Wildfire Explorer shows the maps that were required by state law. You enter your address in to see your land, and it will create a report for you that will give you some basic information. This is what the page looks like. And you look at that map and the first map, and they're almost identical. All they did was change the colors, basically. So up in the left-hand corner is a place for you to enter your address, and then it will zoom in on your lot. This happens to be my lot. I live on Evans Creek out in the Evans Valley. I'm in the high fire danger area within the WUI. And I guess I'm an overachiever because according to their information, I'm in the top 1/2 of 1% of the high fire danger in the entire state of Oregon. Wow. Now, I've followed this since it was originally adopted in 2022, and as they look at the map, they would let you go on and see what their calculations were. Never have I got the same number assigned as their wildland hazard map evaluation. It started at a 1.3, and then it went to a 1.4, and now it's a 1.5. It just keeps going up and up and up. And the only thing that's happened to my property is trees have gone away because I've had them cut down. There's supposed to be 4 factors that they look at when they did these maps, and that is topography, vegetation, climate, and weather. Weather changes daily around here. Climate that's pretty universal, and it doesn't change from week to week, day to day. The topography, how steep the property is, that hasn't changed. I haven't gone out there with the D8 and started moving a bunch of dirt. So the only change that has happened is vegetation. And it's got less, not more. But the number keeps going up, kind of like our power bills. So I look at that, and on this website, there's a few buttons that you can click and see some pretty colors and see what things are. This is supposed to be the probability of fire in my area. Up on the hills on the sides, it's a darker brown. It's supposed to be higher probability of fire. It happens to be BLM for the most part, and so that makes sense because they don't clean their forest. So this tells that it's probability, and then you can go in and there's a little bit of information there. This is the only place that I ever saw a number for this probability, and it's a 6-digit number. 5 of those are after the decimal point, so how they can calculate things down to a 6-digit number kind of befuddles me. It just doesn't make any sense. This is one of the pages that you can turn on, and this is supposed to be flame height. That's what they try and calculate from the vegetation, is if a fire gets started on a good fire day, what happens. And the yellow in the center of it is supposed to be flames that are over 12 feet high. The next lighter green, that should be 8 to 12. The purple on the left-hand side, that's supposed to be 0 to 2, and the other purple is 2 to 4. The lighter purple is 2 to 4, and that white, they say they don't have any information. So here's an aerial photograph of my property. That yellow 12-foot flame length is where my swimming pool and my wife's garden is. That area where they don't have any information happens to be the riparian area along the creek, which Oregon Fish and Wildlife says I can't trim the vegetation in there because that's going to affect the fish, so I have to let things grow. And that's what happened down in the Phoenix Talent Fire. The Bear Creek Greenway proved to be a fuse because it was so overgrown that fire just came up the Greenway and traveled as far as it could, and it burned those two towns. Because we can't modify things, and even if we do, they don't care to change the maps that affect us. If you read the letter, this is a close-up of what it is. In the very center, it says where data can be found that describes your property and all these factors that they look at. And it says, if you go to this website, you can find it. So I went to that website. It's an 8 gigabyte file, which is it's substantial. So I went to their file and I clicked on a data point to see what it had to say. And it says, I can't read it. Go to the Microsoft Store to find a program that will read this information so you can find out what really applies to your property. So I said, okay, tell me which one. I clicked on it and it says no results found. They couldn't find a program that could read it. So how do we verify anything that they've done if we can't see the data or the maps that they've been using? I tracked down a little bit further because of my business goes into graphic information systems, and I found out which program they used. And it's a $700 license per year to use the program to look at it. It says you can use it for, I think, 21 days if you'd like, if you have a business address. So most people, they have no access to this. It's not a public domain program for you to be able to see what the state has done and how they got to their results. So here's those two maps side by side, or not side by side, but to get them on there to where we can look at them. And if you look at the patterns, in the top one, when we had 5 zones, we had the orange and the red, which is the high and the extreme. And now with it just being high, that's how it shows on the bottom map. And I ask you to look at it carefully and tell me where there's a difference. Because this was supposed to be the course correction when everybody got upset and yelled at the state and saying, you've messed up, fix it because we're not happy. Their fix did nothing. Part of the information that they send you, it references what are the Oregon rules that have to apply when you make an appeal. And I'm explaining this because they are very focused, and it makes it very difficult to appeal because they don't want people to talk about what they've done to their property, what it's done to where you lose a sale because it's in a high fire danger area. They don't want you talking about that. They want you to talk only about how the map is created. This says that appeal is from January 7th to March 7th. Found out that the actual 60 days ends on a Saturday, so they have extended it to Monday, so you've got till March 10th to file your appeal. Here's the appeal form. It's a simple one-page form. Click the box and fill in your name and address, and it looks pretty simple, and you fill that out, put it in the mail, and you're done until they come up with the hearing, and then you go explain why you think they're wrong. Yeah, but we'll get there in a little bit more detail here. It says the appeal is designed so you cannot base your appeal on what you have done to your property. If you went out and cleared everything, took the house and put it underground, paved everything else, you'd still be shown as high because it's a hazard area and not based on anything you've done to your property. The board, which is the Board of Forestry, says they're supposed to provide opportunities for the public input for the assignment of properties. So they're supposed to be able to show you how they got to where they got, but they don't pay any attention. When the map was finally adopted, they started a 45-day comment period. That was the 1st of July. Over 2,000 letters went in about the map. I listened to the meeting that the Board of Forestry had September 4th and 5th. They did not mention one of the letters that came in. They ignored every comment that happened. Part of it, it says they have to send you a notice. And that's right, they did send you a notice. So they met their burden, but that's about all they did. It says it's supposed to allow affected property owners and local governments to appeal the assessment of the properties of the wildfire after the updates in a reasonable time, according to a subparagraph B, and we'll get to that. It says that the map must be sufficiently detailed to allow the assessment of wildfire at the property ownership level. But if you saw those maps, it's at a neighborhood. You couldn't see my property lines reflected in vegetation. Those are just squares or rectangles. So we could look at it at a property level, but their data is not at a property level, so there's no way that you can define what happens to your piece of property. Here's the thing that I think is a big problem for the state, and I hope it goes that way when we file our appeals, because it says they're supposed to ensure through clear language, graphics, visuals, examples, that the underlying criteria for assigning the hazard zones are publicly available. As I said, yes, it says you can access it, but you can't read it. And it says, and it has to be comprehensible to a public audience. So at the fairgrounds, we had a gentleman that's a statistician, and he came up and explained some of the fallacies of the map and the way they got to their data. But that's for specific professionals to understand that. They didn't, I don't think they explained it at a public audience level. Does anybody here understand how this whole thing came about and how they got to where they got? They didn't meet their burden of proof to show it in a way that we can understand it. So the problem in the contested case, and those are the references in the Oregon Revised Statutes and the Oregon Administrative Rules, it says when you file an appeal, you must specifically state the issues that you have to have addressed, the criteria of the map being contested, and the relief sought. And this way we've got some people out in the other room to help fill those out, and we've got some possible points for you to use in any appeals. And the relief sought, I think at this point it's take the map and take it down and burn it as fast as you can. Here's the part that I probably get more questions about this than anything. It says in the Oregon Administrative Rules that a natural person, I don't know what an unnatural person is, but a natural person, attorneys put this together, so that explains a lot. It says you can represent yourself and you may be represented by an attorney or other representative, may. But if you're a corporation, partnership, limited liability company, but we get to the part that says, and trusts and government bodies, they must be represented by an attorney, except in specific cases, 055. But that exception does not apply to the forest department. It's only other departments, like if you had a contractor's license and you were appealing a revocation of your contractor's license, there's some places where you can do it differently, but it doesn't apply in this case. But we did get that clarification that they did say you don't have to use an attorney now, even if your property's in a trust. You wouldn't need an attorney unless it goes to a hearing. And that's what I want to talk about at the end of this, if it has to go to a hearing. It says additional information is your name, your address, your property address, and the phone number. And these are all public records, so if somebody wanted to look all of these up, they can look it up and they would have all of your information available. And here's the kicker that I pull my hair out about. It says, failure to raise an issue as provided in this rule shall constitute a waiver of the opportunity to raise the issue in a contested hearing. So you either have to raise the issue right now in your appeal, or you can't talk about that later on. So they're trying to narrow it down and make it very difficult. So if you're going to put an appeal in, and I'm going to urge everybody to put an appeal in, put down as much as you can on there, because it's like the whole thing of throw as much at them as they can, and if they throw some things out, that's okay. If all you get is one thing to stick, you win. So don't take a chance on neglecting anything. Do everything you can to try and defend your property. So here's some appeal points that they're not clear language. They didn't give adequate graphics, and it's not comprehensible at a public audience. All this is explained, next door if you need some help with this. And Ron is very good at advising people. There's a website called undo762.org. We have all of this on that website. So if you're not writing it down or taking pictures of it, that's okay. You can get it easily. Other things, the data is not available to the public for inspection to verify the accuracy. The computer program is not in public domain to where you can just use it. So how can you verify anything of their data? The data is all theoretical. Nothing was verified through actual conditions. Those flame lengths of over 12 feet, it's supposed to be from the trees or whatever vegetation there. They didn't come out and check my property. They didn't come out and check your property. They didn't come out and check anybody's property. This was a canned program of the vegetation that they bought from a company back in Colorado. The values that they use in there are inflated when they start talking about what your probability of having a fire is. It's very inflated, up to 73% inflation on their numbers. So they make it a lot worse than it actually is. The data is not shown at a tax lot level. It's not coordinated with local partners to include counties. I happen to live in Jackson County. There was a 10% discrepancy in the number of tax lots the state showed and what the county shows. They said, oh, well, we were using a different database. I don't care if you use a different database. If the numbers are not accurate, they're not accurate, and the map is fallacious. So they did not do their homework. One of the things that I found out talking to Jackson County Commissioner was they went through and checked all the letters they got to see what properties they were going to have to defend. And one of the things that showed up on their list, on the county's list of being in the wild area, the wild and urban interface, and in a high property, high hazard value, was Britt Gardens. So they didn't even get notice about Britt Gardens. How can you miss something like that? It's one of the premier places down here. Nobody should miss those kinds of things. In the letter And the things that you need to do is they ask, what do you want? If you had a choice, what would you like to see changed? I'd say repeal the map. It's not accurate. It's not based on tax law. It's not placed on good data. And if it's not on good data, then it should not be used to try and tell people how to manage their property. One of the things that I don't like about it, and I talked to Jeff Golden when this thing first got started, he's the senator from Ashland that is the father of this. So I talked to him and I said, why don't you do this incentive-based, not mandated? You know, it's not a bad idea to try and clean up your property and keep some of the vegetation away from the house. If you put in solar panels, you get a tax break. If you do things to the house to make it more insulated to conserve power, you get a tax refund. Why don't you do that with wildfire? He says, well, I can't sell that to the other people up in Salem. They've got other things that they need to put their money for. So they don't want to help us. It's all on the property owner. And one of the things that we've talked about at length is, why are you forcing the property owners to have the biggest chunk of this when the biggest problem we all know is the federal forests around here? The big fires come from the federal forest. 83% of the acres burned every year in the state of Oregon is from federal land. They're trying to attack the wrong thing. They're not going to fix anything. And one of the things I always point out to the people when I have to go talk to them is that Senate Bill 762 was adopted in 2021 as a response to the Alameda fire and the San Diego fire, where we lost thousands of houses. Nothing in this law would have fixed anything or prevented it or helped it. That area was shown in a moderate area to begin with. It's shown in the moderate area today. And we know what happened in that summer. I'd say that the information should be based on real-world facts that are verifiable. I can just picture what's gone on to create this whole thing. Is there's some little man behind a green curtain pulling levers, and out pops this map. But when you pull the curtain away and say, I homeschooled my kids, or I should say my wife homeschooled the kids, and I took credit for it. We always told them they need to show their work. You have to be able to prove it. You can't just say, here's the answer, and you go, well, how did you get there? It's magic. We can't do things on magic. It's got to be based on actual facts. To get information, you can go to the State Forestry website. That's the address there to go there. They have a wildfire tab. And so if you didn't get paperwork, or you threw your paperwork away figuring it was junk mail, you can get the appeal form, a frequently asked questions sheet, and all the data that came with it. There's a phone number if you have questions, and there's an email address there. We should have all this up on that website, Undo 762, so don't think it's going to go away. It's all there for your use. One of the biggest problems in my business is new legislation. And it's one of the reasons I retired, is every time you turn around, they're coming out with new laws, new laws, new laws. And being in this business of trying to help people with their property for over 50 years, my experience is it's never gotten easier. It's always getting more difficult to do anything on your piece of property. So, new legislation that's proposed in the legislature today. Senate Bill 79, also proposed by Senator Golden, requires that counties cannot approve dwellings on exclusive farm, forest zones, or mixed farm and forest zones if the land is identified as the high wildfire hazard and within the WUI. So if you got a vacant piece of property, you can't build. But they've also gone a little bit further and say if it's in a habitat or a habitat movement connectivity area or a high-value farmland, they're trying to get people off of rural property, not let people live on their own piece of ground. So this is some of the things that are the next step past this wildfire system that they put in place. And I say put in place because that's the law today. SB762 will limit the size of a replacement home. If, say, you had twins at this point in your life and you needed to do an addition, you can't make your house larger by more than 10%. If you have a small house, you say you want to knock it down like mine's 1,200 square feet, I couldn't make a house more than 2,500 square feet at all. What if you got your mom or somebody that needs to come move in and you need space, you need to do an addition? They're limiting that. How many people have home businesses? If you're on farmland, they're making it to where if you rent the property, you cannot have a home business. You have to own the property. And if you're doing a bed and breakfast, you can't have more than 5 people use your bed and breakfast. Another one, 73, prohibits a county from rezoning land from farm or forest to any non-resource use. We all look at the hillside on the right-hand side as you start up Mount Sexton and see very few trees there. Nobody's going to try and make a living growing trees on that side of the hill. You cannot change the zone to anything else to do any other type of use. There's land out in the Illinois Valley called serpentine. It has specific chemicals in the soil, magnesium and calcium, makes it very difficult to grow crops or trees. I remember when we did the comp plan for Josephine County, we had state people down here, and they go, you got great land down here, you can't put just houses anywhere. People need to make a living off of that land. So we took them down to 4 corners in the Illinois Valley, looked over to the left, and there was a stand of trees there. We said, how old do you think the trees are looking at the size of them? They had forestry people with them. And they said, well, that looks probably about 35 to 40-year-old trees. And with an 80-year rotation, they should be ready to harvest in about 40 years. So we took them over, drilled the trees right in front of them, and showed them that the trees themselves were 135 years old. They were stunted in growth because of the chemicals in the soils around here. That's why we have some very unique things here in Josephine County. Why are you telling people that can't make a living off a piece of ground that you can't rezone it to where you can do something with it? Because they're making it impossible to build a house on resource land. And if you look at the state of Oregon, there is 1.5% of all the available land in the state that is used for development. And that's in the cities and rural areas where we have houses. 1.5% of the area. Almost half of the state is in federal ownership. SB 85, another Jeff Golden system, requires a fire marshal to create a neighborhood protective grant. So they say, yes, we'll help you pay for fixing things up if you go through a non-government organization to develop a plan with your neighbors to promote fire resilience for the entire neighborhood. You have to work with a group of at least 8 properties. And if one person doesn't meet their requirement, you don't get the money. It's collectivism and communism from my perspective. Those aren't American values. We have our own freedom. We should be able to fix our land up and not be dependent on other people. There's another bill from Noah Robinson, Bill 678. This would repeal 762. But there's some provisions in there that need to be fixed before we can go further with that. And the reason I bring this up, because many of you have probably heard on the news that our governor has finally seen the light to some extent, and they said, let's stop this appeals until we give the legislature a chance to fix it, because we're getting so many people being opposed to what we've done. So she says, okay, the appeals, they still need to be in on time. They have to be in on March 10th or before. You can't do them late, but we won't start any hearings until after the legislature ends, which cannot exceed June 29th. So they're putting it off, but it doesn't go away unless the legislature does something. And the only reason the legislature would do something is from response from you. They need letters, they need appeals, they need everybody to tell them what you think about what's going on here. This is the committee that put this whole thing forward. It's chaired by Jeff Golden. There's 2 Republicans on there, Todd Nash and Fred Girod. And there's 2 other Democrats, Floyd Przansky and Kathleen Taylor. So it's a 3-2 vote most of the time on that committee. If Jeff Golden doesn't like it, it doesn't pass. Because he can schedule things, and if he doesn't like what's coming up, like if Noah's bill is sent to this committee, he can just refuse to schedule it for a hearing, and it just dies. So that's why we need to put pressure on the whole state. Every representative, be it a House of Representatives member or a state senator, needs to hear about this. We need to talk to Senate leadership, bombard them with letters and phone calls and emails. I think this isn't a topic that I'd like to talk about, but I feel we need to talk about it because we've got to do something. A lot of people, even today, when this thing started in 2021, still have not even heard of what's going on to this day. And they go, what is this all about? It's about control from the state to try and make you responsible for the fire problems here in Oregon. And it's not our sole problem. We're a small cog in the wheel, but they think they're in charge instead of us. We've got safety in numbers, so folks, let's push them back. They did respond the first time. They did withdraw the map. We do have their attention of what's going on. When we had the meeting at the fairgrounds, that was a day and weekday, didn't start till I think 7 o'clock. I had a phone call that morning from Salem. What are you guys doing down there? They have heard about what's going on in Southern Oregon. All of us need to respond because we have their attention, and now's the time to do something. So, Ron has some announcements, and then we'll take questions and see if there's anything we can help clarify or let you.
Bob's right. We have their attention. Let's undo 762. There is a rally, a peaceful protest, and I do mean peaceful, at the Capitol on February 25th at 11 o'clock. There's actually a busload or a couple busloads coming from Josephine County, and that bus will be leaving, looks like it's going to leave Medford at 6 a.m., At Food for Less, it's going to stop at Walmart in Grants Pass at 6:30 a.m., depart there 6:20, stop at Albertsons, Roseburg. Basically, we want a bus load when we get to Salem. I'll be up there talking about this thing. We got to get fired up. You got to get excited. Nothing happens till you get enthusiastic. You'll never get anything done by being mundane and boring. Never. We have a rally right here in Grants Pass, March 1st, on the courthouse. You know where that's at? Just be there. That's from 12 to noon. We should be doing this in every county seat in the state. Everybody should be fired up about this. Problem is, those urban counties like Multnomah don't care. They don't care about us. Washington County doesn't care about us. Right now, it's it's Douglas County, Josephine County, Jackson County that are mostly leading the charge on this. I'll tell you something right now. You that live here in North Valley, you live in the highest hazard as far as the state is concerned for wildfire. Yeah, we have a problem, but I think we can take care of it locally. We don't need the state mandating to us what we can do and can't do. So let's undo 762. If you got questions, keep them pointed on questions, and we'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I do not have a question. I have an email information on the list that you guys provided. Pam Marsh, the email that is listed on the site to copy her email is incorrect. So you see that it says Jeff Golden at OregonLegislature.gov. Pam Marsh at OregonLegislature.gov is spelled wrong. Your email will not go through. The S should be a G.
Okay, we'll get that fixed.
That will not get back to her whatsoever.
That's assuming she'll pay attention to us, but we need to fill her inbox till it's full. Yes, sir.
So, I think it's important that everybody understand that your voting power is huge. Go back to the 90s, there wasn't much participation in fighting, stopping the management of our forests. We have no mills, we barely log it. When we were logging, we didn't have fires like this. We managed our land. The spotted owl, you're feeling the ripples of the spotted owl right now. We have a president in that understands management. We have to bring it back to management because, just like Bob said, I don't care what urban interface you do. You get the perfect storm, the white weather conditions, the fires start in the middle of the forest, the fuels are being loaded because we are not allowed to salvage the burned ground. Because the environmental groups are tying this up. The BLM and the government agencies are burned out. I'm running a forum right now where we're attacking this at the Senate level. And if we don't get back into managing our lands, I don't care what you do. This is a control method. But to stop the fire itself, we've got to manage our lands. And when you manage your lands, it reduces the speed of the fire, which then protects the urban area. And it starts with people voting. If you think about it, it was environmentalists and industry going head to head. The general public sat back and watched. And guess what? This is what we get. We have to step up and we have to support our government agencies that are trying to manage the land. Right now, we're tied up with environmental groups. The environmental groups are beating us up at the forefront. We don't even have a legislative body to fight these guys.
It's time to.
We need to go after these people and put a stop to this. It starts with management within the center of the forest, and once we do that, then we can maintain control. We're completely losing the fight right now.
But this is the place we have a spot to fight it, starting with this bill to stop what the state has done, because we do have their attention. I was on the phone a couple of times to Salem, and Deschutes County is starting to step up as well. They're with us. If you want to really follow other things going on, there's a thing called the ODF wildfire site support site that has a lot of things that are going on in this whole fight. So there's a lot of information available. Yes, ma'am, you had a question? The attorneys that we've talked to about a class action, they said until there is an actual harm completed, it's premature to do a lawsuit for that.
Cancellations would be harm.
If you can find an attorney that you can afford to do it, start it. Yes, sir.
When will you be voting on Merlin SB762?
It's not scheduled for a hearing yet, so we don't know when it's going to come up. And we're hoping to make some adjustments to that bill before it gets to committee. There needs to be some definite amendments to it, because it was drafted a couple years ago when it first came out. So we've got to update it a bit to attack the things that have come later. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not clear what, I'm not arguing, I'm just not clear what the problem might be with 678. Can you go into a little bit more detail about that?
You got an hour? It's a 17-page bill. It creates another forest land urban interface that's managed by the State Forestry Department. If you are going to appeal inclusion in that forestry urban, you have to go to the circuit court. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of the things that we need to get fixed. It's not ready for prime time yet.
The biggest problem with it is never going to see the light of day because Golden controls a group that it has to go through to get out to. That's the biggest problem.
That's why we're trying to get the pressure on the leaders of the Senate to force it to come out, because the president of the Senate can reach down there and pull it up over Golden's objections. And we know that we do have Golden's attention at this point. He has gone on record saying that this map is not working. One of the solutions that's been bandied about is, instead of doing it at the tax lot level, we just do it on a larger level. And you go, if you do that, then there is no opportunity to appeal at all. It takes away all of your authority and power and puts it in the state, and you're done. There's a lot of things that we need to fix. I think this gentleman's first, and then you, ma'am.
He wants to know about other wildfire maps. Let me clue you about something. This map did not come from OSU. It came from an outfit called Pyrologics, who's tied up with a parent company called Vibrant Planet. They're all climate hysteria. Okay? Well, they already know. I think we're already seeing that. There's lost sales in real estate. There's what happened in California. If you can't insure your property, you can't sell it. Yes, it would. And I think this whole thing smacks of a Fifth Amendment takings of your property rights, but we're going to have to wait for that to be ripe. Go ahead, Ralph. Where do you want to hurt question?
The chairman of the State Forestry Board is on the board of Thousand Friends of Oregon. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just really curious. Jeff Golden, he kind of lives in Ashlandistan somewhere. And what is his property?
His property's rated low, it's completely overgrown, it's got dead trees along it. There's only 2 people in the state legislature that are in high risk. Dwayne Yonker and Noel Robinson, both of them from our area. Yeah, he was.
It's a half mile from where the Almeida fire, point of origin. If the wind had shifted during that fire, his house wouldn't be here. It's in the same green zone.
So how did that happen?
Right there in it.
And what can be done about that?
When it comes to the next election, I want you all to remember one thing. What 762 did to you and where it came from. Your power is in the vote. Your power is talking to your neighbors. You go talk to 20 of your neighbors and tell them, don't vote that guy in because he's bad for your property rights. How do you think these guys got elected? Somebody voted for him, not me, but somebody.
So then that leads me to you say vote. Then we have paper ballots. And
And that's where we need to go. That's another issue. Hey, before you all leave, I think we ought to do something. I think we ought to say a little prayer, which I should have done at the beginning of this meeting. So, bear with me. So I thank you, Heavenly Father, that your mercy and grace shines upon us. I thank you for your guidance, for your divine guidance, for your wisdom, for your instructions. I thank you for your power, because we know through you we are world overcomers. So I thank you for these people here tonight, for safe journeys home. I thank you for lighting a fire in their hearts and souls to stay active, to get motivated, go out and talk to people, and we want to change this state back to a conservative state. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.